And it's time to do some business again. Good morning and welcome to Business Morning. I'm Temple Ashaju. Together within the next 60 minutes, let's talk business and really analyze and, of course, get to understand some of the key things that will drive investment in the markets today. But first, let's start with the news. We're troubled. MTN IPO is #1 on the radar now for a whole lot of investors and, of course, the regulators, policymakers today. MTN says the 10.1 billion naira demand by local authorities from South Africa, its parent body, which is now disturbing its plans debut IPO in Nigeria, and it has tagged it as pretty challenging and awkward. The telecom giant says the listing remains on tap, but the considerations for alternatives are also in top gears. That's what we're having now from MTN, basically. In terms of the next story we've got, we have the fintech story that the Securities and Exchange Commission says it will soon come out with regulations that will guide technology products in the Nigerian capital markets. The acting director general, Mrs. Mary Udok, says that the intention is to issue new regulations that aims to transition towards a technology-driven capital market as well as protect investors. The apex regulator of the Nigerian capital markets also notes that the growing public interest in investments is making digitalization significant. Meanwhile, the acting DG, Ms. Udok, has announced the former executive director of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, Mr. Adelu Bajamo, as the chairman for Capital Markets Committee on Fintech Roadmap. Again, let's look at another burning issue that we have before us. The Federal Inland Revenue Service has asked local government authorities to recognize stickers presented to them from other regions in the country. That's as part of its moves to curb multiple taxation in the system. The directive, which is contained in a communique, is a fallout of the just concluded Joint Tax Board meeting in the country. According to the FIRS, emblems or stickers obtained in any local government area in the country should be acceptable in other local government areas nationwide. The FIRS also instructed state tax revenue authorities to explore all non-personal income tax sources as it looks to consolidate all taxes database on a single platform. Now it's time to do some market analysis. We know that the equities market was down seriously yesterday by 3.46%. The NASD OTC was no different as it also slumped by 2.3%. The fixed income market also has its own share of all this decline. Let's go to the stock exchange where Bosun Omofaye, head of business desk, is waiting to give us analysis on all of this. Bosun, good morning. Thanks for joining us on the show. You're on the other side of the lagoon again today while I'm here. So let's talk business. Let's look at the numbers from yesterday. How did we get to where we are?
Well, Temple, thank you. Good morning. Sometimes it's nice to be downtown. It's just that I have to add extra hours of driving to my daily commuting around the city. And of course, everyone who's on social media knows what everyone is saying about the state of roads in Lagos. And the Third Mainland Bridge is as very vehicular jammed every morning, as it were. That's the major bridge which are used every day from mainland uptown to downtown. So that's a story that is there on a daily basis, just trying to resolve that on one side. Infrastructure, you need to fund that and all of that, and what the current administration in Lagos State is doing. But of course, the bigger story is about the market, as you mentioned. Temple, you mentioned the MTN IPO, and listening here on the stock exchange, which the company now, the CFO says is pretty challenging and awkward. Well, that's a very strong description of this IPO being planned and being talked about now for several months and a year and more. The stock exchange, the SEC, everyone has been talking about the MTN IPO. When is it going to happen? They're done with Ghana IPO already. They raised about $250 million US on the Ghana market. The stock is already listed on the Ghana Stock Exchange, providing more liquidity into that. Even though the IPO in the Ghana market was less than expected, they were looking for $700 million US. They didn't get that much. The Nigerian market, the word on the street was that MTN will do about $500 million US and perhaps list all of that on the Nigerian market. Now the company is saying that will be pretty challenging and awkward when, of course, on one hand, the telco giant is facing regulatory sanctions regarding $2 billion in what the AGF called unpaid tax, and then another $8.13 billion US what the central bank says the telco giant should bring back into the country, which was said, quote unquote, illegally transferred out of the country. You have all of that on one hand, then MTN Nigeria also taking the Nigerian authorities to Federal High Court. So it's all messy, if you want to put it that way. Right now, it's all messy here. How does this company continue to do an IPO and list in the market? You talk about confidence. How will it talk to investors? Do a roadshow within Nigeria, say we want to list in this market. At the same time, you are suing the AGF, you are suing the central bank of the same country. So this is pretty straightforward, as the CFO of MTN says, Group in South Africa says, look, this is pretty challenging and awkward. Of course, it will be very awkward for you to do an IPO, to take your landlords to court, while at the same time you want to do something within the house. So pretty awkward, and we're going to leave that for everyone to see. But it looks like this IPO has been long in coming, and there's no sunset as to when this IPO will come. But again, if you look at the broader market, Temple, and this is where the big story was, it was a bit of a sunset. It was a bloody Wednesday on yesterday for the market. The big market, which is the Nigerian stock market, fell significantly. Now we're looking at a year-to-date 15.56% in the negative territory. Since September started, we've lost 7.33%. Yesterday was almost 3.5%. This is the lowest level this stock market has sunk since May 2016. So, and that tells you that we're all back to that period. Yesterday, we saw the equity value of the market also down below the 12 trillion. Don't forget, we started the year around 14 trillion. Now we're below the 12 trillion. In between, if you do a simple math, we've lost about 2 trillion since the new year started, if you do a very simple math. But of course, you look at in terms of yesterday's specific numbers, the volume was a little bit higher than the previous sessions. Now we're closer to something around our daily average, about 250 million shares, and the Naira value was also significantly higher, almost 7 billion local currency. In deals terms, those numbers seem consistent, close to 4,000 transactions. That's also higher on Monday and Tuesday this week. So you see a bit more interest in that market. Maybe a bit of that is reflecting again in the I&E window, where we found yesterday the total FX transactions at the investors and exporters window significantly lower to 220.6 million US dollars. That's about 60% lower than when the market finished off on Tuesday. So our investors are trying to slow down a little bit in terms of selling off this market. What is going on? We're trying to find that out. You talk about the sectors earlier that were most hit. The industrial goods was the most hit. We had the banking sector also down. Then, of course, oil and gas made the single gain of the day. Where do we find the gain in the oil and gas sector? Pretty simple. Seplat, the heavyweight in that sector, gained about 0.61%, less than 200,000 shares, and the shares climbed to 606.7 per share, and you can see the rest. Forte Oil also made a gain, another bellwether in that space, even though the share price has been really tepid in recent week, plus 4.42%. Japol, very small cap company, 4.55%. All the three put together gave the oil and gas sector that 0.4% reading at the end of the day. If you step across the street to the OTC market, where the unlisted securities live, that's on NASD OTC, that is also another negative story, 2.32%. And that index, the USI, is now below the 700 reading all over again. Investors did a massive transaction, 4.2 million shares on listed securities in one single day. That tells you how that market bled. But let's let's finish off Tempo at the fixed income space, where Nigerian Central Bank did 129.6 billion offering yesterday at the Treasury bills window. And although those were in 3 tranches and a 3-day to maturity, but again, you find that the long end of it, which is the 364-day Treasury bills, was priced at 13.50%, which was higher than 13.05%, which that particular bill was traded or was auctioned last week. So that tells you that the central bank is paying more, the Nigerian government is paying more to borrow via the market. But if you look at the secondary trading via the FMDQ, what you found is that there's a bit of a slowdown in terms of total transactions value on that market. Treasury bills less than 100 billion. This is the first we're seeing since the new week started. At the bond market, the Naira bond just still a bit consistent, about 13.30 billion Naira. Tempo, back to you.
Thank you, Bosin. So you recall yesterday we were actually looking at the pie chart of the United Nations of debt, as it is tagged, and it talks about how much countries have actually borrowed and how well they have utilized it to be able to contribute to the economic development. So we saw several sides of that chart, you know, and you were talking about how it affects industrialization. Here we are with a market that is existing now, it's tumbling, and then we had the Minister of Trade for Investment, Dr. Okechukwu Enelama, yesterday on our sister program, Sunrise Daily, you know, analyzing this industrialization policy. And you recall he also mentioned how it affects the Volkswagen deal, all of these other deals that we've signed with Germany, China, and United Kingdom in recent times. What do you make of how that will impact on our markets, where you have concerns around local capacity, talking about the likes of Better Glass and the likes of those countries that are, companies rather, listed now that are also supposed to contribute to what this industrialization policy will bring about for us?
Well, Tempo, thank you. That's a very good observation. If you look at the industrialization and those investments you're talking about, your debt is good, but again, you have to use the debt to grow the economy. If you're not achieving that, then you are in the water. It's as simple as that. Nobody borrows money just for the fun of it. If you borrow money for consumption, if you borrow it to pay salaries, you're not doing absolutely nothing. You're just moving around in circles. So you need to borrow for infrastructure and industrialization. But talking about how much deals we've signed, how much MOU we've signed with the Chinese, with the Germans, with the British, with everyone else in the loop, with the Russians, with the Ajakuta Steel, with the Ukrainians, whatever you call it, we've gone a long way, and we have a wardrobe full of MOUs since the country's independence. We're not short of signing deals. We're very good at putting pen to paper. The problem we have is that we need to translate all these MOUs, all these contracts into industrial production that create jobs, create wealth, create more tax for the government, and get the drill down into the bottom of the pyramid to the people on the street. So that's the conversation we're having, of course, we had yesterday with the Industries, Investment and Trade Minister, Okechukwu Enelama. How does it affect the market? That's my business here. If you look at this market, Tempo, take a look. Years ago, we had a section on this market, a segment called the automobile and tire. That segment has disappeared from the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Go online, check it out. It's not there anymore. Agriculture is now number one. Automobile and tire used to be on the stock exchange. And that was where you had Dunlop Nigeria, PLC listed, and a few other companies that are into businesses relating to automobile. That segment is gone, which means that technically we don't have anything on automobile on the market. But of course we have the industrial goods, where you have some companies like Berger Paints, well, which seems to be the only one surviving. Others are almost dead, out of the market. IPWA, for example. So these are paint companies that will benefit from if we get this automobile deal right with Volkswagen and GM Motors and others that we're talking to. Then you have those who will have to make batteries. Then you talk about the glass, Oluwa Glass, Better Glass, CMB, and I think that's Delta Glass. These companies are technically gone as well. You had one based in Ondo State, there was one in Delta State, and I think there's another one making glasses, drinking glasses, transparent one, the breakable. So we can make glasses here because we have the primary ingredient for making glass. All the shoreline, Ondo State, and all the way down to River State, you have the kind of materials you can use across the sea around the seashore to make glass. So we can produce glass, windscreens, rear view mirrors, whatever it is for these automobiles. And these companies will benefit from it. You can see many more companies come back to the market. Berger Paints will do well. Maybe some of the paint companies will come back to the market. And we need all of these, Temple, but I'm sure the conversation is still ongoing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bosun. This conversation is going to continue in the third segment of the program this morning. We should have another guest to talk extensively about these deals that we've signed and how it relates to the automobile industry in Nigeria. Backward integration, these are the topics that we've got on our radar this morning on the show. But after the break, we'll come back to you with analysis on commodities markets, specifically on the oil sector.